but we know that there are a lot of barriers to success in voice of customer. And so the role can often be siloed in an organization, opposite to what you just shared. And that constrains collaboration. Data collection tools could be wholly inadequate.
Yeah.
And leadership buy-in could be very spotty and with loose alignment even to broader strategic goals. To be sure, that was not part of the job description for the person when they took that job. But can you expand on then maybe the barriers you've experienced that you see when you're working with clients?
And you hit on a few of those. So I would say, well, I think you hit on a couple of those, Frank, because these are some of the top barriers that I have seen that keep a CX strategy from really influencing how work gets done within the company. And one is you are not aligned to the strategic priorities. And I do not mean NPS or CX. So what I mean by that is, what are the things that the company is rallying their resources and focus around? So I mentioned digital transformation is an example I gave earlier, right? So we needed, and that may look like kind of a subcategory under that, maybe active users on an app, right? That is an important metric. It's the sexy metric. It's what we want to do. We want to convert our customers. And oftentimes the CX leaders are working on what they think is important. So number one, you've got to prioritize your work to make sure that it is supporting that priority of active users on an app. How is what you're doing? And if it's not, then you probably need to be doing something different than what you're doing, because that again links you to the things that are most important for the company at that time. So link to that strategic priority. It's the cool, sexy stuff that's going on in the company. Instead of being over here on the periphery, you've got to be embedded and part of and a critical player into that. Number two, we've kind of talked about it as well, as not being able to prove financial impact, the value prop of CX. So moving the number to say, okay, well, our score's better, but you can't find any corresponding incremental revenue, or you can't find a corresponding reduction in the cost of servicing, then you are set up for a lot of risk in what you're doing. And and I think this is where so many of those CX organizations that have recently been impacted by, again, defunding, this is a critical reason why, is that you aren't gathering the right data and the connections that we talked about even earlier, the cross-functional connections, in order to demonstrate the linkage of why it's important. Another one is that I talked about this before, where you as a CX leader tend to be the bearer of bad news. So nobody, you've got the cooties, they don't want to mess with you. I always say, early in my career, I remember I would, my whole life was around customer service. And so to your point earlier, I hear all these bad news stories and I would get so I'd want to stand on my desk and stomp my feet and say, don't y'all care? Why does no one care? Why is this okay? So when I would show up to my stakeholders, the marketing team that put out a promo that the stores couldn't execute, that we said we were doing it, but you go into our stores and we're not doing it, I would get so fired up. So then I would go to those stakeholders and I was like, you realize your customers are so unhappy and you need to fix that. Well, who wants to work with me? None of them wanted to work with me because I was, again, calling their baby ugly. And I had to learn that I want to advocate for the customer, and that's not it. I mean, it got so bad that there was one, I'll say it was a C-suite member, literally told his team, you avoid Michelle and her team like the plague, avoid her, because she's going to call us out on what we're doing wrong. And I had to really learn that 99% of the time they were nailing it. I was just getting so bogged down in the 1%. And when I could go to them with hey, you're doing amazing. You can do even better. And this is by how much, if we could address this pain point. And now it was like, oh, I'm here helping them win, instead of telling them that they're doing awful when in fact they weren't. So right. That is, I think that you can't be that bearer of bad news if you want to be able to influence and drive change.
Yeah, you have to be able to work through the organization. But I will say that my experience with you, and this is in the kindest way, is you are a bunker buster in terms of getting people past maybe outdated ideas, past this is how we've done it before, past we're having a challenge with another part of our company functionally, and we can't get past that particular leader. Like, you seem to have that ability to affect change across the organization.
So remember I said in the beginning, I have so many battle scars.
Yes.
Oh, I learned this the hard way. And it's awesome. I'm so grateful for that too, because I think that has really helped me understand the political and cultural dynamics that keep, I mean, we're talking CX here, but this is with anything, that keep people from being successful. So always learning to, how do I meet them where they are? Like, let's meet and agree here. And then let's talk about how to, because everybody wants to do better than where they are, right? So how can I help do the double click up to the next rung on the ladder and the next rung? And I'm not there as to shame. I am there to support and elevate, because in the role as CX leader, you are not the decision maker. You are an influencer, and you do not influence and get people to do something different unless you build an emotional connection, value, trust. You deliver what you say, and they feel like you are on their team. So I learned that if I can demonstrate that I am on their team first and know myself how that links to the customer and how I'm championing and advocating for them, I am much more likely to be successful than if I enter the conversation with the customer says this, because that I have found is a lot longer to get results, because they're not emotionally driven by the customer. They're emotionally driven by hitting their number and achieving what their targets are. So if I can enter and meet them in that place, knowing that what we're doing is I am bringing that customer lens to it and that customer influence. And then at the end, as we make progress or hit a single, then I am there to say, this is validating how this is great for the business, as well as how this is great for the customer. And here are the data points, financials, business impacts that prove it. So then I have given them a script, if you will, to talk about how they are helping customer experience at the company, which typically may not really be part of the vernacular. They may be showing, yes, this helps customer experience, but they don't have a tangible proof point. And this is giving them that tangible proof point, which is very valued and respected.
When you go in to consult with a company, do you find typically that the voice of customer team or person has that level of agency, or has taken that level of agency to work across the organization so proactively?
Almost never. What I want to do, whatever I do when I come in, is I help give them, I'm going to say the script. And sort of the positioning is, you're like an investigative journalist. You're not there at this point because you don't know enough. You know what you know in your little bubble, but you don't know enough about what's going on within the organization. So here is a template, script, questionnaire that you can go and meet with your key stakeholders, coming from a place of curiosity to seek understanding, not to tell them what you're doing. We're not there yet. We are just beginning to build relationship and then get lens of what's happening in their departments. And so that gets it started. And then you're thinking about, then what are your priorities? And then your job is to come back the next time you have that conversation with an insight you don't know, because you have information to help them. And in fact, I mean, this is a kind of a little different spin on it, but in one organization, there was the customer service department really was misusing another technology to be case management solution that they had. And so they could get the work done, but it was extremely inefficient. It was complicated. It took a lot of time for the agents in the contact center. And coming in, it's like, okay, there are so many better ways to do this, but often, right, there's no funds. There was no funding to do anything. So it was just an accepted, this is how we do business. It is what it is. No motivation to try to break through. Well, in this exercise, right, go talk to IT, because IT is making business investments in technology all the time. And what was interesting within IT is they were in the process of deploying a new ticket management system. And they were struggling with getting kind of excitement and buy-in from their stakeholders. And I said, okay, well, what in this system and technology, here's my business problem. What could I use, or what could we use in that contact center to help them solve this problem? That IT leader said, you know what? If I could get the customer service organization using this new module that this particular tech provider had, I have money to fund that. And if you will help me get more users on the new infrastructure, you're helping me. So let's work together. Well, that's what funded the new technology that they would have never gotten in the contact center before. But had those conversations not happened with, tell me what you're doing, what are you working on, what are the struggles, what are your priorities, what are you worried about? Like, just be interested in that investigative journal, investigative reporter hat to understand, and then step back and say, how can I help them be successful? Well, that was a beautiful relationship, right? A symbiotic relationship that came out of that. And you can have that with all of your stakeholders. I mean, I could go through many examples with marketing, with facilities, there are ways that people have something they're trying to do and they don't quite know exactly how they're going to get there and hit their numbers. And when you can come in and offer support, real support, magic happens. And that's how you start to break down those silos and disparate data sources and disparate teams. And you start coming together to solve one problem as an organization, instead of, well, that's somebody else's job or somebody else is working that. It becomes the we. We are working together on this one thing, and we are going to be successful.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius said that humanity was born for cooperation. And I think you exemplify that at the highest level and why you're successful.